Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our listeners of the Book Talkies. And whenever you're listening to this episode, today I guarantee you that you're going to be part of an epic joyride, especially for the history lovers out there, because we are going to talk about a very informative and very highly engaging book. I must say, graphic novel in this case. And the name is The People of the Indus, which is written by Nikhil Gulati in collaboration with Dr. Jonathan Mark Kenoyer. He calls him as Dr. K. Today, it's a special occasion because I have this opportunity to not only have just one guest speaker, but two guest speakers on our show. We have none other than Nikhil Gulati himself, the author of The People of the Indus. And also joining us is Amir Hassan, who by profession is a customer experience analytics leader at Wells Fargo, a voracious reader, a very successful Instagrammer, bookstagrammer in this case. And he was the one, so let me thank Amir first. He was the one to recommend this book for today's episode. On this note, let me welcome Nikhil and Amir. Nikhil, Amir, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Kaustubh.
Thanks for having us, Kaustubh.
Before we jump into understanding the book itself, my first question to you, Nikhil, is when we had off the record conversation, we had a very, you sound to be very funny, very jovial, and that's what reflects in your books as well, in your graphic novel as well. So the first question is, can we know more about you and how you got into creating graphic novels in the first place?
Man, so much pressure, huh? To be funny and jovial now. That's like short way to kill all the the whole sense of humor. It's like, I have to be funny now. No, but anyway, how I got into graphic novels, I'll keep it really short because it's a bit of a long-winded journey. I used to be a techie plus MBA, like standard. Okay, my parents were really happy. It's like, okay, he's done. I even did a master's in computer science and everything before I did my MBA. At some point it was like in the middle of my MBA where I realized that, this is not working for me. Like, I'm just hoping that I'll find one day a job that's going to fulfill me and satisfy me, and that I will be working on with like my full heart and my full brain. And I was just hoping something will just fall into my lap. But at this point, during my MBA, I never thought that I'm going to be making graphic novels. So I came to like this idea of comic books and graphic novels through a very different angle. So my first idea, because I was in a business school, was to start a business. And the business was going to be very simple. The business was going to be, it's going to be a mobile library of comics. So there's going to be a bus which is going to go around from place to place. And, it'll go to like, let's say 7 spots in the city in a day. And it'll do a circuit in 7 days, so it'll be like 20 spots it'll serve around the city, and you can rent graphic novels for a week for whatever, and you return it. So it was going to be like a business kind of a thing, but also like a library. So I started collecting graphic novels for this library, for my first library, and pretty soon I realized that there's only American, Japanese, and some European graphic novels that are there, which I thought were like, yeah, these are really good quality things. So I was like, where is all the Indian ones? There's a few, but there's like really a handful. There's not that many, So then I was like, okay, maybe the problem is not, having a library, but actually creating Indian graphic novels. Like, who's selling the stories? Who's selling our stories in this format? So I was like, okay, fine, then I'll become a publisher. I'll just bring writers, I'll bring artists, I'll put them together, they'll create some nice stories that I'll kind of tell them that, okay, I want something around this topic or that topic. Then I realized, well, the writer's going to write their own stories. Why are they going to tell my stories? And then I was like, yeah, okay, I'm actually interested in telling some stories in my own way. So, okay, not publisher, I will write the graphic novels and I'll have artists draw it. So then I started writing. And then when I finished a few scripts, I started reaching out to artists, and then I realized they're very expensive. So at this point, I found a mentor in life who was like, listen, what do you ideally want to be doing? If like everything was perfect, what would you be doing? And I looked inside and I was like, yeah, the answer is pretty straightforward. I would be writing my own comics and I would be illustrating my own comics.
This brings me to a question to you, Amir. I mean, you have been in. You are a proper technology professional. A customer research and analytics professional since 15 plus years in the field. How has been your journey in? So just tell us about your journey in falling in love with reading. Like, how did you fall in love with it?
I think as far as I remember, I've always had a book in my hand, right? Whether it was in Britain's Noddy or whether it was, Winwood Reade's Martyrdom of Man, right? It doesn't matter. I've always had a book in my hand, and as a kid, a lot of us. I grew up around books. I think that's a big influence, right? It matters. It matters to a lot of people, not everybody, but where you grow up, and luckily I had books around me within my closer family and outside. Both my parents were readers, and that helped, and so on. I know what you're saying, Kaustav, about how graphic novels helps you imagine. For me, I love a book because I use my imagination. But what graphic novels tell me is not just. I mean, I love the format of having a non-fiction documentary through graphic novels because it's restricting me in thinking, in a good way about a specific event, an activity, right? And that's where I'm just going to come back to Nikhil's book. I love the fact that somebody could talk about history. Well, it's important to read history in its dreary way. It is important. You can't escape it. But to come to describing what Indus Valley Civilization looks like, what a city looked like, what a township was, how it was planned. We've all read, in 7th, 8th standard, the 90-degree turn, the sloping bathrooms of Indus Valley, and all that, right? But to see it, I think it brought everything to life, right?
Yeah.
For me, the beauty of this format, it just brings to life what should be apparent to you.
Why did you, so for a graphic novel as a topic, why did you choose this topic? When did you decide, how did you decide, I want to, create this on Indus Valley Civilization? Anything about that, please?
Yeah. A few things happened together. One was that I was living in Ahmedabad at the time when I went to Lothal, and it was my first introduction to this thing. And I became curious after visiting the site, and I was immediately comparing it to Egypt and stuff, because it's the same time period when they're building pyramids in Egypt and stuff. So I was constantly comparing, why are these guys not building pyramids? Where are all the impressive big artworks and stuff, that'll dazzle me, which I can take a photo in front of or something like that. But it wasn't there. So it got me curious. What's up with these people? Were they not capable? Was it a simplistic kind of society or whatever? Or they didn't have the skills or whatever? But then when I started scratching the surface, I found it's one of the most fascinating time periods and people. And the reason they're not building pyramids is because they're doing things very differently. They're using their creative genius in a very different manner. And I was like, why don't we have books on this? Why is nobody telling me this? So I came to it as a reader and as just a history enthusiast. And then at that time I had started making comics only recently, so I was looking for topics for sure. But also there was this need that let's fill this gap. Why is there nothing on this? Why do we have 1 million books on Egypt and Mesopotamia and ancient China, but literally nothing for the popular audiences, at least in this format on the Indus Valley? So part of it then became from the opposite angle, where I was like, okay, I'll create it. I'll create the book that I want to read.
So question to you: what intrigued you to pick up The People of the Indus?
So look at this book, right? We talk about cross-genre, breaking genres, breaking all those now. It's not trying to do all that, but it clearly, just brought two huge genres together: graphic novels, right, and very professionally written graphic novel, I must say, and history in collaboration with one of the top historians in that topic, in that field together. I like both. And the minute it popped up, I was like, boss, this is something I gotta pick up, right? There's no question about it. The thing was, for a second I thought no, because it was, I don't know where I got it, but it was positioned as a kid's book, children's book. It is not. I mean, it's, of course you can give it to children, but I think it's for all age groups, right? Like,
Yeah.
even if you've got a slight idea of what Indus Valley was, how little bit of how phenomenal it was when you read it in history, right? You gotta pick it up.
So, Amit, a follow-up question again. So so you're kind of describing the book, but what were the key nuggets that you really loved about the people of the Indus? Could you tell us about that?
So I'll talk about in different parts, right? Like, first, the storytelling itself, what Nikhil's done very nicely is telling us about Indus Valley Civilization, making us remember some of what we had read and adding more to that, from our school books, but also bringing in very nicely, very beautifully, a personal tale of that time. So it's not, I'm not going to say, we use non-fiction so broadly. It's not just that, right? It's not just that. It's also a bit of life of at that times. Now, a lot of history that we read is of kings and monarchs and all of that, right? Anirudh Kanisetti's Lord of the Deccan starts with this, that I want to tell people's history, but Nikhil does. There is a little bit of fiction, and Nikhil can talk about that, but he's bringing two pieces together, and that is beautifully done. That's one. Second, I love the aspects of how he's, that part of how we decipher their language. We all know, if you've read Indus Valley, we all know that's yet to be cracked, right? And behind that lies so much treasure, so much good. Nikhil taught us, why is it so difficult, right? He teaches us, I'm using that word again, teaches us why is it so difficult, how do people go about it? And that was a joyride, right? That was a high of the book for me. Talking about one of the biggest what if questions of human society. What if we live through this instead of, kings killing each other, people killing each other, slaughtering? Technology could have advanced without military leading it, right? That for me is the biggest
thing. In fact, in the Indus Valley, it advances because there is no warfare happening. Because the only way to compete and the only way to get rich is actually if you are just either producing better stuff, or you are finding newer and newer people to convince them, hey, here's some stuff, do you want this? I'll take that in exchange. You get into this relationship of exchange rather than force, rather than I'm gonna tell you what to do, and if you don't do it, I'll beat you up. So that was the genius of this society for sure. So that has been the paradigm or that has been the conventional wisdom about how societies were organized, how sophisticated, highly populous societies were organized. The model was that the power kind of is centralized because you need somebody to direct people, and so they can all decide how to cooperate, because if you have hundreds of thousands of people working together, there's no way everyone can talk to each other. So you need some kind of a structure in order to figure out what we are all going to do together. And the model was that you have a hierarchical system, and that's how things get done. But here we find, from all the evidence we found so far, that in most of these cities, it's a decentralized power structure. So it's not that there's no hierarchy, but the power centers, maybe there are, instead of one power center, there's like 7 or 8 in each city. And so each power center is competing with the others to kind of be in the ascendance, start to, corner some of the trade and manufacturing and industry. So that's their route to power. If you can come up with better stuff and sell it better, you become rich. And if you can convince people to work with you, well, you can become rich. And so how are you going to convince people? Well, if you want them to come and settle in your part of the city, you offer them good facilities, you offer them better houses, you offer them better living conditions, and that's the way it seems like things are getting done. And that's just absolutely fascinating.
Understood. I know that we still don't have a Rosetta Stone to decipher the language, but you said that it took like 5-6 years of humongous research, collaborating with Dr. K to come up with this book. And I do have an important question though. We know that Harappa was not violence driven or war focused or war driven civilization. but how did they manage conflicts? Did something arrive, or were you able to see something about it? Day-to-day conflicts management, how was it?
We don't know exactly. I mean, that's part of the allure of the Indus civilization, that it's so mysterious, and the fact that it is doing very special things. So you wonder even more, how are you doing this? I mean, clearly there would have been conflicts. There's no way there were no conflicts. But it seems like their resolution mechanisms were completely different. It seems to be more of a consensus based kind of a thing, that let's come to a consensus, come to a discussion. And this is not unique, actually. This is not special to the Indus Valley. In fact, I don't know if you've read The Dawn of Everything, this book which became kind of popular recently, where they're making the case that, Native American societies, for example, they were completely debate and discussion based societies. There was no idea of the chief has said this, so everyone must follow. In fact, the idea was that everyone is free to do whatever they want. But generally, you would talk to each other, you would try to get most people on board, and people would then agree to either agree or disagree with whoever is the chief to do things. And if somebody said, listen, even if all of you have decided to do this, I don't want to do this, then that's it, that person is left alone. So these models are not unique. They've been there. It's just that, last 300 years we have heard pretty much a very small subset of human stories, which is very Western centric, very, in fact, even very British imperial colonial whatever centric. So there's been only a certain kind of story that's been told about how people get things done. So it's not super unique. But yeah, we don't know the exact mechanisms. We don't know, like, okay, yeah, there was this council, and then this is how they elected or nominated a representative to this council, and this is how decisions were made. They met once every 3 weeks. Those kinds of details we don't really know,
Right.
but we can sense it sort of in the archaeology.
Right. And
Yeah.
Amit, I have a question to you as a reader. Compare reading the People of the Indus with the 5-10 pages which we would have had in our school books. Did you have any assumptions in your mind? Which, if you remember, what you read, did you have any assumptions in your mind, and maybe that book helped you, clear those assumptions that, oh no, this is now how it was, but actually this is how it would have been. And maybe Nikhil, after Ambir answers, maybe you can also chime in through your research, anything that interesting came out to you as well. So yeah.
So two things. One, confirmatory, right? The fact that they were built. I mean, I recall those 4 or 5 pages pretty vividly. 90-degree roads and public bath and citadel and washrooms with sloping, very clearly demarcated rooms in like an apartment complex and whatever it's called that time. All of that, right? Nikhil confirmed that very nicely, put it in our heads how it's drawn and all that very nicely, way the whole city is structured. That's one. But what those books didn't do, and of course 4 or 5 pages, nobody's blaming them, is they ended Indus Valley Civilization very, very abruptly, right? Got over, Aryans came in, and nobody's talking about what's happening there and all that, right? But something that I read much later, Ibrahim Irali's book, Gem in the Lotus, the first part is about Indus Valley Civilization, and Nikhil also talks about it, is the decline, right? Like how it degraded, how maintenance wasn't there. I don't know if this is correct, because Ibrahim Irali is of course dated. So he writes about how when people excavated, they found 9 layers of the same technology. So somewhere technology was brought to a halt, maybe conscious. Nikhil also talks about it, and he offers a very nice solution to what is still being figured out. How did they end? Where did they go? About how cities, dissolved into smaller dwellings and so on. So these two things clearly for me evoke back into the reading that I had done when I was in 7th standard.
Yeah. From my own reading, or whatever I recalled from my school, Indus Valley thing was very, it wasn't 5 pages, it was like 1 paragraph is all I remember. I don't know, maybe I like just forgot or something, but like I remember very, very brief, something about the drains, and literally that's it. I mean, if somebody had told me that this was a place where you had, cities as big as 100,000. There's some estimates, maybe it's like a little less, but like 100,000 people living in a city, and there's 5 large cities and dozens of towns with like tens of thousands of people and all this. And for 1,000 years, they're flourishing. They have high quality stuff. Their quality of life is actually way better than in Egypt, like for the average person. But they have no warfare. They have no kings. Like that story, that one liner is something that might have caught me, and that I don't remember from my school books. I
The
was
whole
almost
thing wasn't there for sure.
yeah. So those kinds of things, I remember when I started doing the research. I remember being very surprised, and the fact that these people are the main sailors of their time. We don't see ancient India as a sailing society, but apparently these guys are the ones building the biggest ships and sailing over open oceans. So there's a point about, did these guys use the monsoon winds? Because using the monsoon winds to sail over open ocean, where you're in the middle of the ocean and there's literally no land around you, that's a skill. You need firstly shipbuilding skill. You need
Right.
the ability to control the ship or whatever and make it go wherever you want it to go. And thirdly, you need navigational skills. You need to be able to either figure out through the stars or whatever, that is this the right direction I'm going in, and then knowing that okay, this is the general direction of the winds, in 2 months it's going to change, so this is the time to go. It's pretty sophisticated technology. And
Right.
Dr. Kenoyer is like 100% they had figured it out, because where monsoon winds lead from Gujarat to Oman, literally if you were to set sail from Gujarat using the monsoon winds at a certain time of the year, you land in a spot in Oman where we find like lots of Indus Valley stuff. Like we find their pottery, their seals. We know clearly they were going and traveling there. And yeah, so that the fact that these people are the main sailors of their time, that also came as a surprise to me. Like we don't see Indians as sailors until the Cholas,
Yeah.
which is much later. So that was another really cool thing.
Super glad that you're bringing this in the book, because so if you hadn't brought it up, you would have, so as a civilization, you just think about the geographical area, right, where that civilization, where the people are staying. You do not
Yeah.
think about how Harappans sailed all the way to Mesopotamia and came back and had a very lively trade with them. That's how the
Yeah.
society, the
Yeah.
civilization flourished. So I'm glad that
I mean, it's
you're
basically, it's like the whole society is being run by Marwadis. Think of it like that. They don't want to fight. They just want to get
Yeah.
rich. If in fact, if they, instead of if fighting is just wasting resources,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, you want to trade, you make something nice. This is not good enough. Can you make something better? Okay, now it's you. Now you're talking. This is looking good. Chalo, you give me some of this, I'll give you some of this. And look, but what last time I traveled over here, look what nice wine I bought over there. You want to buy some of this also? Oh, you really want to source more of it? Chalo, I'll keep making a yearly trip and I'll keep buying it and I'll keep selling it to you. I mean, they were really like aggressive. Like for example, they like we know so little because it's only archaeology that we can go by, right? So we look at stones, we look at like jewelry. And if you look at jewelry, these people, there's this famous lapis lazuli, if you've heard of it. It's the blue stone from Afghanistan. So a lot of ancient societies and kings and all these people, they really love that blue stone because it's a bright, nice blue color. The problem with lapis lazuli is that just use it a little bit and it starts to, like, if it's polished, it starts to fade. The polish will wear off easily. So the Indus people had found a different stone called carnelian, which is red, and if you treat it under like certain fire, whatever, heat it up to a certain degree, it becomes even nicer in color. That thing is a very hard stone. Once you polish it, it literally, the polish stays till today. Those stones are shining as if they are new. So these people didn't really care about lapis lazuli. They preferred carnelian. They never wore jewelry made of lapis, but they figured out that in Mesopotamia, those people love this stuff. So they literally settled a town in Afghanistan and they just started buying from there. That lapis lazuli makes its way all the way to Gujarat, from where it's being put on boats and being entirely taken to Mesopotamia, and everything is being sold over there. So it's that level. They were going at it with some kind of intent, and they loved having a good material life. I mean, you can see that very clearly. They want nice things around them. They want nice houses. They want comfort. They want nice jewelry. They have taste. So, and they're using their brains to do that instead of, oh yeah, we have to build a giant pyramid for this guy, one guy who's going to be buried in it. So, how do 50,000 of us, I mean, not to take away from the genius of actually designing and building a damn pyramid, but at the end of the day, it is 50,000 slaves working for one guy, you know. So that kind of thing we don't find in the Indus. You find that the average person's house is actually pretty decent quality and nice, and every single house in Mohenjo-daro has a toilet. How about that? Every single house has a bath.
Wow.
Which we are struggling
26.
for today in India.
Yeah, every single house. Not kidding. They had 700 wells. Everyone has access to fresh water. In Dholavira, they're obsessed with the whole city having good water. And Dholavira is in an arid region. It's in Kutch. It's actually on an island in the Run. So almost a third of the city is just a rainwater harvesting system. A third of the entire city area-wise is just a rainwater harvesting system. It's being channeled. Everyone has access to this water, and they're very careful about never mixing clean water with dirty water. So there are different drains that are draining it out and just taking it completely out of the city, because they've realized that, okay, if water gets contaminated, you have disease. And that's the genius of it, right? Like, imagine, like, it's for the first time you have 50,000 people living together, and suddenly you realize, hey, listen, when we are not keeping things clean, everyone's getting sick. So we have to get together and work on this thing that keeps the city, this keeps the entire thing clean. We can't be that, okay, that palace area is clean, but everything else is filthy. Because once there's disease, everyone will get it. So, and maybe because it was a tropical environment, so there's more diseases as compared to, let's say, a cold place. So they had to deal with it. And maybe that's why they came up with these solutions rather than other solutions where, oh, you have some money? Chalo, I'll just beat you up and take all your money.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
This has been one of the most entertaining episodes, that on the book talkies, hands down. And I think it happens quite rarely that a book that is written, it also tingles. It not only tingles your curiosity, but also adds to your knowledge repository. I think The People of the Indus is one such book. An earnest request to all our listeners to please pick up this book, The Book of the Indus, written by Nikhil Gulati, and just be delighted. We will share all the links from where to download this book in the description. So please do check it out. And Nikhil, Amir, thank you, a big thank you for spending your evening on this podcast, on this episode. So I hope you had fun as much as I had. So thank you very much for
Thank you,
being
Kaustubh.
here.
And thanks for reaching out and saying such nice things about the book. Like, it's literally what keeps us going. Creating a book, you're kind of in a black box. You don't know how people will take it. So it's really nice to be here and talk to you guys. Yeah, and thank you for having me.
This was amazing. Thanks, Nikhil. Thank you,
Yeah.
Costa, for setting up the platform. It's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.